Today we're talking about an award-winning paper at Strategic Management Journal called Do Formal Contracts and Relational Governance Function as Complements or Substitutes? And this paper was published in 2002 in the Strategic Management Journal. I'm Laura Poppo, and I am the Donald and Shirley Clifton Chair in Leadership at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln.
And I'm Todd Zenger, the Ann Eldon Tanner Presidential Professor of Strategy and Strategic Leadership at the University of Utah.
So we're going to talk about why we got interested in this paper, its impact, where do we see or want to see the field of strategy going, and what does this paper mean to us? So the charge we took in this paper was based on an assumption that Oliver Williamson made, and he's a Nobel laureate for his work in transaction cost economics. And what he assumed is that if you have two people, a buyer and a seller, and they're involved in an economic exchange, their identity doesn't matter. What matters, if you want to offset economic risk, is writing a good contract. But why wouldn't the identity of these two people matter? What if they trusted one another? What if they worked collaboratively with each other? And what if they didn't mind sharing private information, like their short-term goals, their long-term goals, or their plans? So that's what we attacked in this paper, was the role of relational governance in formal contracts.
The way that a lot of scholars, particularly scholars in sociology, but also a lot of management scholars sort of thought about this question as they thought about relational governance and trust functioning as a substitute for these contracts. And in fact, it wasn't always just that they were substitutes. Often the narrative was that using a contract would actually undermine trust, though it wasn't just a substitute for trust, that it was actually something that was kind of almost a negative complement, that it would impede the formation of trust. And we sort of took a bit of a different angle, really empirically trying to explore whether that's true, but also suggesting a different narrative, which is that contracts and trust or relational governance actually function as complements. It's interesting, I opened my phone this morning and there was an article that I think came out a few weeks ago in the Wall Street Journal that I just happened to see today, talking about the role that a contract plays in potentially helping a marriage, and that illustration sort of highlights the tension. On the one hand, you sort of see, well, writing a contract could undermine trust. And yet the narrative in this article is about how this contract actually enhanced and benefited the relationship. And that's the tension we wanted to explore. Are these things complements or are they substitutes?
Yeah, so in that space of relational governance, just tagging on what you just said, Todd, the couple was able to state their goals of what they wanted individually as well as in their marriage. And professionally, they both wanted to pursue their careers. So when things got tough and she said, no, I don't want to do this anymore, he reminded her of this contract, which was actually a conversation, a norm that we're both going to support each other through the ups and downs of our professional careers. So next we're going to talk about impact. And this paper has had really, really broad impact. When we have scholars in a number of different disciplines that have cited this work, and they come from the fields of economics, law, public administration, supply chain management, marketing, accounting, and of course, strategic management. So the kinds of theoretical perspectives that have cited this work or we've influenced has to do with trust, buyer-supplier relationships, alliance management and its governance, and contracts.
And I think that, the reason that I think in particular caught on with that broad set of audiences was that the empirical narrative that we showed was that, in fact, contracts function as complements rather than just as substitutes, and then that writing a more extensive contract actually enables greater trust, and having a deeper relationships actually enables you to write perhaps a more refined kind of contract. So we're able to sort of empirically show this pattern of complementarity. And so rather than scholars being able to think about these things as substitutes, now suddenly they're recognizing the deep connection that these two, what had previously been independent forms of governance, really have with one another.
Yeah. It was a new terminology that scholars never embraced, and then they embraced. We came up with something that expanded how people thought as opposed to close it down. Next, we're going to talk about where we want to see the field going.
All right. Well, you should go wherever you want to go. That's number one. But I think as it relates to this paper, I think there's still a lot that we have left unexplored in this relationship between how sort of formal governance shapes the informal. There's an enormous amount in our field that's been written about the importance of sociality and culture, about the advantages of knowledge flows and the importance of sort of relationships in that pattern of knowledge flow, but very little bit of it has really been connected to the firm, the legal boundary of the firm, and we really know very little about why these sort of formal arrangements actually shape this informal relational dynamic. And I think there's still a tremendous amount that remains unexplored about this complementary relationship between sort of formal and informal organization.
So as an undergrad, I did experiments using rats in psychology. But even though I was focused on learning, the thing I left that program with was a deep appreciation for the role of social psychology and social cognition. And what I would like to see is over the next decade or so, we look back on what social psychology has created in terms of these rules that govern social interaction, and how can we apply those to understanding decision-making and strategy, problems, judgment. I think we need to span multiple levels of analysis from individual to group. And I love the idea of using discipline-based research and applying it to the field of strategy.
Obviously, we're deeply honored that this paper has been selected for this award. Our thanks in particular to Dan and Mary Lou Schendel, who have given so much to this journal, and we're honored to sort of receive this award that carries their names. I guess I got into this field because I deeply cared about organizations. I was intrigued by them, intrigued about how to improve them, and it's sort of deeply rewarding, fulfilling to feel like perhaps I've, with Laura, added some small element of knowledge and to our understanding of how organizations work and can be improved.
So for me, receiving this acknowledgement from a community of peers was something I never dreamed of. I really love solving messy questions that are not really obvious how you move forward. So every time I think about this award, I feel really proud, and I'm so happy. So thank you.